Hi, welcome to the latest tutorial here from Replay Studios. In this tutorial we'll be looking at bass guitar EQ, and in the last tutorial we looked at bass drum EQ, and the logical progression would seem to be to go from the bass drum to the snare drum. But I prefer doing the bass guitar because the bass guitar and the bass drum, they have to work in tandem, they have to work together. If you can get the two working together, that's really half the mix done already, because everything else just seems to fall into place. Think of it as a construction from the foundation up. You have to have the foundation well developed and well thought out to do everything else. And the instruments that are going to give you the low end are the kick drum or the bass drum and the bass guitar. So now let's hear the entire drums with the bass guitar, so that you can hear the rhythm section, which gives you the pumping that you need in the song. Let's just go through the verse. Okay, and now I'll show you one of the most important things that you need to have a good bass sound. If you remember in the previous tutorial, I talked about how you would use a technique called multing, or a technique where you use various sound sources or various microphones on the same sound source. And what happens with the bass guitar is the bass guitar has a lot of low information, but it doesn't have that much high information, which sometimes makes it hard to hear. So as you can see, what you're actually hearing are two sounds from the bass. You could actually use 3 or 4. In this case, we'll be using only 2. And the one is the actual sound of the bass guitar, direct. And the other sound is a distorted track of the same bass guitar. And I'll show you in context. I'll put the music playing, and you can hear the bass well defined. And then I'll switch off each of the components, the distorted bass guitar component, and then the original undistorted bass guitar component. Okay, let's hear. Okay, we could only hear at the end the original bass guitar, and you can see that it's much cleaner, but it can, in this particular section, there's not much of a problem. But for example, if we went into the chorus, which I'll just show you now quickly, I have to put the guitars in. Everything gets a lot denser, and you could easily lose the bass guitar. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. You can see when the guitars come in, the bass has to compete against other things. And I'll switch off the distorted bass, and you'll see that it immediately just seems to disappear. So you can see, you can still see where the bass is in the mix. Whereas if you don't have the distorted guitar, it just seems to disappear. As soon as you get more instruments, chow chow bass, you don't hear it anymore. So let's go back to the verse, which is a bit simpler. It's still the same principle. And now I'll show you the two basses together and then each individually. Okay, hopefully you can understand that each of the sounds individually, they don't cut it, they don't quite make things work, but the two together, they have to be mixed in a certain way, makes everything very, very discernible. So now what actually happens is, if you remember in the previous bass guitar, the bass drum EQ, you'll remember that at 55 Hertz, because the song is, I like tuning the drums to specific notes. The other song was in C major. The key of the song is C major, but I tuned the drums to an A, which is a relative minor, which would be A minor. So you would have, for example, the A note, the C note, the G and the D and the E note for your drum elements, and everything works well. If you remember, I can actually show you that the drums, the kick drum, I put the kick drum at 55 Hertz. I gave it this resonant peak. Now the important thing to do is, whereas in the bass drum you give it a boost, in the same frequency you actually subtract it from the bass. And what happens with that is, seeing as though the bass drum is continually occupying that frequency, you don't want to build up too much energy in that frequency, because that's when things start sounding mushy, tubby. You get everything really muddy. So what you do is, remember, the first thing, always the most important thing, is to apply the high pass filter. If we go to our friend Music Math, which I've shown before in other tutorials, you will see that the lowest note that you can get on a typical bass guitar is the E note. We're using standard tuning, and we can see that the E note, which is over here by the pointer, says 42 Hertz. So this song is tuned in normal tuning. If it was drop D, it would be lower. If it was drop C, even lower. But this is normal tuning, so that anything below 42 Hertz on the bass guitar you don't need. So you could put the filter somewhere over here. I'll leave it somewhere at 36, so that you don't really incide on the actual note. But then at 55 Hertz, I'll pull down quite a bit, so that the bass, the fundamental note of the bass guitar comes through. The bass guitar, no, so the fundamental note of the bass drum comes through, and you take it away in exactly the same place. Let me just put the drums on again. Okay, that makes sense. Now, the really important thing to have that sub bass working really well is when you place, if you remember from a previous tutorial, I talked about the Baxandal type of EQ curve. And what you do is you place the EQ point right at the beginning. In this case, it's 20 Hertz. Okay, you put it right at the beginning, and you give it, the Baxandal works in this way. You want a very low Q. That's probably too low, but something in this region. Okay, and then you will, this is how much? 24 dB. That's just way too much. But we'll start applying this, and you'll see that we're still taking away from the 55 Hertz. And we will get this really thunderous low end working very well. Okay, so let's just put it playing, and I'll start upping the boost. We don't want anything. We don't want the bass values to go too high on the loudness meters. Okay, hopefully you've got good speakers and or a good pair of headphones, and you can hear how the bass just totally fills out in such a solid way. You're not getting anything muddy. You're not getting anything chubby. It's just doing what a bass should do. It's just filling the room up. Okay, cool. Bring this down just a little bit, maybe. Bring it up, sorry, so that it's not quite so extreme. Okay, and this is a very, very important part of bass guitar EQing. Now, what I'll do is I'll switch off the distorted part. Sounds good, but you want some type of character. Now, an important thing that happens with the distorted part is you don't need the low-end information, because you've got the low-end information coming from the other undistorted part. So you've got the clean tone coming through well, and then in the area where it starts getting just a little bit weak is where you put in the distorted part. And if you remember what I told you about the spectral analysis, the song, just let me do something. You'll see that in this 2K region, the distorted guitar is just a little bit weak. I'll put it to play again, you'll see that it's weak, and I'll just give it a slight boost in that area, and that way we'll have that constant curve, or that constant fade out that you look for in this frequency spectrum analyzer. Remember, from about 2K, or more or less from the 2 to 3 or 4K region, you want everything to have the slow roll off. Okay, and you can see that in this area it's just a little bit weak. Okay, everything's nicely balanced. Now let's just see how this sounds with and without the EQ. Okay, without the EQ, you can hear everything just not being quite as sharp. Let me just do that as well with the drums. Okay. Remember, roll off the low frequencies on the distorted bass, and Bob's your uncle. You can bring it in with the fader. You can see that this fader was at 4 dB below, and you can bring it up to taste. I'll take it all the way down and then slowly push it up, and you'll see exactly when it starts sounding good. Flat. Sounds good already. Bit aggressive, but not bad. Okay, sounds perfect. Hope this helps you. And remember, good mixing, good recording, good music. See you soon.